Mr. Klein here with our first of 3 lessons on African civilizations. This lesson, of course, will be on the Ghana Empire. The next lesson will be on the Mali Empire, and the third lesson will be on the Songhai Empire. Africa is a really big continent. In fact, what we're going to do is we're actually only going to zoom in on this little area in red. This is in West Africa. Okay, so this area, we're going to talk about the geography real quick, and we're going to go into the Ghana Empire with this. So whenever we talk about West Africa, we have to talk about 2 very important geographic regions. The first is the Sahara Desert in the north and the savannas in the south. Okay, and a savanna is a mixture of open areas and tree cover. It's like a forest, but like not really densely covered. Okay, and between the 2 regions is what we call the Sahel. The Sahel is a transition area between the savanna and the desert. It's dry. It's called semi-arid. But the thing is, it gets less rain than the savanna, obviously, but it gets more than a desert. So that's why we call it semi-arid. Whenever we look at this is West Africa. Okay, as you can see, the Sahara Desert's up in the north. That's all the sand stuff. The savanna, the green part's in the south, and the Sahel is this little strip in between. It's where the climate transitions from desert to savanna. And in the Sahel region is a very important thing in establishing the Ghana, the Mali, and the Songhai empires, which we'll get into. Through the savanna and cutting through the Sahel is West Africa's largest river. There are many small streams and stuff like that, but the biggest one, the largest one, is the Niger River, which flows in an arc across the region before heading south to the Atlantic Ocean. Now, I know none of you guys are thinking this, but this is how you pronounce it. Niger. Say it with me. Niger. Niger. Got it? Okay. The Niger River, as you can see, the big river in blue, and it cuts in this big old arc, and this area from Bamako, that city you see there, to Timbuktu, up in by the word Mali over there, is really the area we're going to settle in when we talk about the Ghana Empire. So with geography of Africa being all settled and stuff here, we need to discuss why trade was so important in West Africa. Okay, without trade, these empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai frankly wouldn't exist. So it's really important to see how this worked because it's what connected West Africa to the outside world. Now, for the people of West Africa, this sounds really strange, but it's super important. A material need was salt for cooking and survival. Now, you might be thinking, Mr. Klein, like salt, really? You need salt? Yeah, you kind of need salt. Without salt, your body wouldn't operate and die. Like your blood's really salty. Whenever you sweat, like the saltiness gets out, and you need to have that. So all throughout history, actually the trade of salt has been really important. And there isn't a lot of salt in West Africa naturally. So as a result, the people of West Africa needed to trade for salt. Well, you gotta have something people want. And if there's one thing the people of North Africa who traded with Europe and the Middle East needed, who, by the way, had salt, they wanted gold. Gold is really abundant in West Africa. Okay? Gold. Gold, gold, gold. And what's really important about West Africa is it's actually not really mined, at least back then, deep underground. As you can see, these guys mining gold rather today, it's done in a similar fashion. You dig up the dirt, you put it in a sluice box, that's kind of like a filter, and you shake it in the water, the soil erodes and goes out down into the river, and what's left are the little gold nuggets and stuff. Okay, so, almost 2,000 years after the foundation of the Ghana Empire, we have people digging for gold in Africa in the same way. Gold's really abundant and trade ensued. Okay, the people of West Africa wanted salt. Okay, they had a lot of gold that the people of North Africa want, and so trade went. Now, the one small problem with trading in West Africa is you kind of got to cross the Sahara Desert, which is like really inhospitable and stuff like that. Traders would travel across the Sahara in huge caravans. Okay, and these are like groups of traders with anywhere between 1,000 to 12,000 camels at a time. The camel was introduced from the Middle East to West Africa by Muslim traders and stuff like that over time, and as a result, they had like the animal that was necessary in order to cross the Sahara Desert. These caravans would go from oasis to oasis where water was, and even the routes were so timed where people would like leave the oasis and go meet them where they could have water. Because if you ran out of water, you were just out of luck. You'd die because of a lack of water. Caravans would head north from West Africa with gold, and they would head south with salt, and everybody was happy. We have caravans just like this still today. Okay, what they do is they get them all together and then they go through there. You had a reliable system of trade routes being established, so which I'll look at in a second. And communities dedicated to trade and these supporting these merchants were established. And so what we see right here, and the shaded areas, what we'll talk about with the Ghana Empire, are all of these trade. We established the whole idea of trade being the lifeblood of these West African empires and what connected them to the outside world, at least what we think of as the Mediterranean and all that stuff. But we need to find out who the actual people group are. Well, the people who became the rulers of the Ghana Empire were known as the Soninke people. And they were one of many tribes in West Africa who led relatively similar lives, similar to early agricultural civilization, mainly because the opportunities for trade with more advanced civilizations weren't really there. Okay, whereas in the Fertile Crescent and stuff, you had all these connections and stuff. West Africa, they didn't really do it, so they kind of developed on their own. And the Soninke people are actually still around. They're a pretty major people group in West Africa, and they have a long cultural heritage which dates back even before then. Over time, they settled in areas containing the gold mines, and they began that trade with North Africa. Now, obviously, trade routes involving gold and salt and stuff like that, they got really, really wealthy really quickly. And because of trade, they were able to gain technology. It allowed them to gain an advantage over the other tribes in the area. And the Soninke, over time, became the dominant culture. And they kind of established what we consider to be a kingdom. Now, this kingdom is generally known as the Ghana Empire. The term Ghana actually comes from the Soninke tribe. And what the word Ghana actually means is warriors. All of this trade, getting a lot of money, they got really, really wealthy. They were able to get better weapons than everybody. Next thing you know, they're controlling a big, huge area, and greatness for them ensued. What we have right here is the Ghana Empire. This area in green is what was it probably about its height of its power. And so in the next section, we'll talk about what we see in terms of its achievements and the great things that went on in the Ghana Empire. Let's talk about the achievements of the Ghana Empire. Now, whenever we talk about these African empires, we come into a little bit of an issue in understanding what actually happened. Much of what we know about the Ghana Empire comes from stories passed down through generations that were written down in the 1800s. Okay, and these were from the traditional African storytellers called griots. And these are some modern griots here. The one main written source we have about the Ghana Empire actually comes from Muslim traders in the 1000 AD 1000s, okay, so about 1,000 years ago, that they came down to Ghana, they looked at the capital city, they saw a bunch of things, they wrote them all down on their travels, and they came back. The Ghanaians, over the course of trade, found they would get good deals from the Muslims if they became Muslim. And they partially accepted Islam as their religion, with some government officials being actually Muslim based on the Muslim accounts. However, the king and the majority of citizens remained followers of their native religion. The Ghana Empire, as a result of the trade, was extremely wealthy, mainly through the policy of the king. The king was pretty much the richest guy. The reason why is he took all the gold nuggets that were mined. Okay, so he had a policy that anything above a certain size, he kept. Okay, the rest could then be used. Trade was done through salt and gold dust. Okay, because salt was rare, it had value. As a result of this, salt was actually used as currency, money. What they would do is they would take big salt blocks and they would trade them. And then the gold dust was sold in certain weights. As you can see right here, we have salt blocks. Okay, so what they would do is they would have units of measurement. A certain amount of salt would be a certain amount of a bag of gold dust, and they would cut the salt and trade with the gold dust. And by gold dust, this is actually what we mean. It's little pieces of gold, it's little flakes and stuff, but not the big chunks like the nuggets. So gold was traded for salt as a means of currency. It was money. We might think, salt? Really? But remember, salt was really, really rare in West Africa. As a result, it had value, which we'll talk more in a later chapter when we talk about money and bartering and stuff like that. In addition to this, the wealth of the empire allowed the Ghana Empire to be really, really strong. Muslim accounts talk about the size of the army and the archers and stuff like that. Had a really large army which protected the trade routes because, I mean, after all, you didn't have the money, you didn't have power. According to the Muslim sources, the army had over 200,000 men. To put this in perspective, in early 2017, the time of this, the United States Marine Corps has about 180,000 men. Okay, so United States total has about 180 to 200,000 Marines. That was the size of the Ghanaian army. Okay, it's a massive army. You wouldn't want to mess with someone that size. Over time, as time went on, the Ghanaian Empire slowly started to fall apart. And the reasons was this are actually pretty simple whenever you think about it. Over time, because of the exposure to Islam in the 600s and 700s and into 800s AD, you had those limited conversions, some government officials and stuff like that. Okay, eventually the king and the nobles became converted to Islam. Okay, because they found it was easier to do business, it was good for politics with the traders in North Africa and stuff like that. However, they let the people follow their own native religion still. Okay, we're not quite sure how the fall of the Ghana Empire happened, but we can figure this out from the tales of the griots and also some sources from Muslim traders and stuff. Is throughout the 1100s AD, okay, the rulers became less effective in their government. There was infighting. There were good kings who weren't very good at ruling, and such a big empire with a lot of money flowing around, you had people wanting a cut of the gold and the salt for themselves. As a result, you had infighting, and then the unity of the Ghana Empire kind of fell apart because people would fight for independence. Eventually, the Ghana Empire became a part of the Mali Empire, which we'll talk about in the next lesson. Okay, so it got really small, really, really weak. Mali got really, really big, which we'll discuss in the next lesson, and then they swallowed them up. In fact, it ceased to exist as a nation by the year 1200, so about 800 years ago. That the basics of the Ghana Empire. We need to know its location, how long it was around, how it was wealthy, what was its religion like, and why did it fall apart. Number one, its location. It was in West Africa along the Niger River. Okay, remember, is that big river in the arc, okay, that had a big arc that went kind of like a semicircle, and the northern part of it kind of touched the Sahel. That was the border between the savannah in the south and the desert in the north. How long was it around? Well, it was around for almost 900 years, around AD 300 to AD 1200. Okay, it reached its height from around 900 to 1200 for the last 300 years. It got its wealth by exchanging gold for salt. Remember, salt was really, really rare in West Africa. Gold, they had an abundance. Everybody wanted gold. They had gold. They got what they wanted. Okay, and they got really wealthy for it. Religion, they had their own native religions. Okay, but it had a growing influence of Islam. By the time the Ghana Empire fell, most of the royalty and nobles were actually Muslims, but your average person still had their own native religions. Finally, why did it collapse? Well, it was the reduced effectiveness of government. We don't know the exact mechanisms, the hows and the whys, but we find out that the Ghana Empire eventually collapsed because you had groups fighting between each other, and one of the groups, the Mali Empire, got bigger and took over them all. So there you go. That's your lesson. First lesson on the Ghana Empire. Next lesson, we'll talk about the successor to the Ghanaians, the Mali Empire, and a dude that was so wealthy he wrecked the economy of Egypt for like a dozen years just on his own. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something new. If, as always, you have any questions, please let me know. And thanks for watching.